My name is Lauren Cowles. I'm also known as OneBoot. I answer quite readily to both. So we're gonna, let's see, a little bit about me. So I've been painting since the first Bones Kickstarter. That was my introduction to the world of miniature painting because my husband and I play D&D, we play Pathfinder, and we needed figures. And someone said, hey, there's this Kickstarter thing that this company called Reaper Miniatures is putting on, and you can get a whole lot of miniatures for $100. And we're like, that sounds great. And so we pledged, and there was also paint. And I said, oh, sure, let's get paint. And then I said, oh, I should figure out what to do with this paint and these miniatures. And so I joined the Reaper forums, and the rest, as they say, is history. So my favorite kind of paint is metallic paints. That should be pretty obvious because all three of the classes I'm teaching are about metallic paints, because I think that there's a lot to them. There's a lot of fun things that you can do with them rather than just, you put silver on the armor and on the shield and on the sword and dry brush on the chainmail and you're good to go. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's a whole lot more that we can do. So let's see. So we're going to talk about what are metallic paints. We're going to go into dry brushing a little bit, and it's going to be more than just, one layer of dry brushing. You'll see when we get there. We're going to talk about how to thin metallic paints. We're going to talk about something I call the 3 degrees of shiny. And if we have time, we'll get into mixing metallics and demi-metallics. I hope we get time to do that, but we'll see. There is a handout available for this class. It's pinned in my Reaper Discord channel. So you can go and download it. You don't need it in class. It's more of a supplemental material for afterwards. Let's see. One sec. It's very dry here. So on the plus side, it means my paint dries very quickly. So if you have any questions, please, drop that in chat, or you can find me on Discord afterwards. I love to answer questions and, give it demonstrations. So, and I try to keep track of the chat while the class is going on. So, if I miss your question the first time, then John will help me keep track of that. He's good about that. Okay, so I do have a list of materials here. If you do not have these exact materials because yours didn't arrive or you just don't have access to them, you can get any heavily armored figure, any miniature that's got a cloak and a shield, really just anything that's got a lot of surface area to it, because you're going to be doing a lot of playing on that. You'll need a gold, a silver, a copper, a dark brown or black, either one will work. Any of the Reaper clears, or if you only have colored acrylic ink, that will work too. And a clear acrylic medium. So if you don't have wash medium, you can use like airbrush thinner. I would not recommend Reaper's brush on sealer because there's a little bit of a matting agent in it. And I'll go into why that's not ideal later. If you only have water, then that will work. It won't be the best for what we're doing, but you can use water. All righty. So again, if your miniatures are already, completely dark, then you're good to go. This is just showing the areas that we will be focusing on in class. So let's set these aside. And let's get started. Okay, so first of all, so what is a metallic paint? So metallic paint is it is a colored base into which a metallic flake has been put. It could either be metallic, it can be mica, it's something shiny in it, and that changes the property of the paint. It makes it a little bit thicker. It makes it mix with other paints a little differently. And there's There's also can be a difference between the base and the color of the flake in it. For example, Reaper's, here we go, Emerald Green has got a green base, but the flake in it is gold. I don't know if the camera's really picking that up. Not really. So it really opens up a lot of variety in what you can do with metallics. Alrighty. Oh, just a really quick, some of the terms that we'll be using in class. So base coat is when you just, it's your first coat of color. It's usually applied after priming, but if you use a color primer or one of the Reaper liners, then that can work as your primer or as your base coat, excuse me. Thinning your paint means you use a thin, clear substance to dilute your paint. For metallic paints, I would recommend an acrylic medium of some kind. Again, if you have nothing else, you can use water. It'll cause that metallic flake to settle out of your paint though. So it's not ideal unless you're James Walpole. James Walpole uses water and metallics and he mixes them on his brush and he is just an absolute wizard when it comes to painting. So, it can be done. I like to pre-mix my paints rather than mixing as I go. So, if you prefer to like mix water and the paint on your brush as you go, then you might be just fine. Let's see, what else? We're going to talk about washes, where that's using very thin paint to sort of color the overall surface, and it'll generally settle into the crevices of whatever you're working on. True metallic metal is a technique. That's the technique we're going to be covering in this class. It's using metallic paints like this to give the appearance of a metallic surface. Opposed to that is non-metallic metal, which is using metallic or non-metallic paint to paint a surface to look like it's metallic. There is definitely some crossover between the two. Like you need to understand how light and shadow interact with each other and interact with a metallic surface. So if you understand one, that will inform your understanding of the other. So I don't necessarily recommend one over the other. I found that true metallic metals tend to read better in person, and non-metallic metals tend to read better in photography, just because of the nature of metallic surfaces just don't really photograph very well. They just don't, because it's the play of the light on the surface of the miniature as you move it that really makes it look metallic. And if you want tips of how to photograph metallic paints, Doug Sunsith is a professional photographer, and he's given me a lot of tips of how to photograph my metallic miniatures. All right. And then demi-metallics, we may or may not get into, but that is mixing non-metallic paints with metallic paints with some really interesting effects. And I will go more in depth with that with my colored metallics class, Chromatic Shine, and that is going to be on Sunday. All right. So, we talked about that, and then thinning. Okay, I talked a little bit about thinning your metallic paints. So what makes, sorry, my nose is really itchy. What makes your metallic paint shiny is those little bits of flake, whether they're metallic, mica, or something else reflective. And keeping them suspended in the paint is what helps keep it shiny. If you add water to it, those flakes are a little bit heavier and they'll settle down to the bottom of your paint puddle, and then you'll just have the colored base to work with, and that's no fun. So let's see. So I use Reaper's wash medium. Where did I put it? There we go. For thinning my metallics. You can also use a flow improver. Where did I put that? There we go. I found that flow improver is a little bit thinner, and honestly, I found that this is a good substitute for water just in my regular painting. So I really like that. You can use gloss sealer, but it doesn't really thin it very much because the gloss sealer is fairly thick. So I would use it more if you're wanting to keep it looking really glossy, like really shiny. But I don't know that I'd mix a lot with it. I when I was first playing with metallics, I started with gloss sealer, but I just found that these two work better. All right. Okay. Oh, so I mentioned Reaper's brush on sealer. So again, this has a little bit of matting agent in it, which you can see on the bottom of my bottle. I haven't shaken this up in a while. Moving doesn't leave a lot of time for painting. So what that matting agent does is, well, matting agent makes things not shiny, which is normally what you want for non-metallic surfaces. If you mix this with your metallics or you put it on over your metallics, it will dull that shine. So it's doing exactly what it's supposed to be. And maybe you want more of a satiny look, not as shiny, but if you're wanting shiny, this is not going to be your friend. Okie dokie. Oh, and then if you're going to be dry brushing with your metallics, don't bother. I don't bother with thinning it because you're going to be wicking all that moisture out anyways. So it seems kind of counterproductive to, thin it and then get rid of the moisture. All right. Cover that. Okay. So speaking of dry brushing, we are going to grab our Dragon Gold and Dragon Copper. And I said the instructions for the class to grab an old grungy brush because dry brushing really is rough on your bristles. Do not use your nice brush. You will be sad. So I prefer flat brushes for dry brushing just because they catch the raised surface much better. If you do not have a flat brush, here's my my old dry brushing brush. It's very fuzzy now. So you can use that to just sort of squiggle around, or you can use the edge, or not the edge, the side of your brush. But I just found that a flat brush really helps me out a lot more. Okay, so we're going to grab these. And where did our elf friend go? There we go. We're going to let's talk about dry brushing a little bit first. For those of you who are already familiar with it, you can, I don't know, get a snack or something, get a drink of water. But for those of you who maybe aren't as comfortable with dry brushing, let me get a fresh paper towel. Dry brushing is removing most of the liquid from the paint that is on your brush, and then painting with just the dry pigments that are left. Dollar store makeup brushes for dry brushing. Yeah, I have a friend that likes those for dry brushing. Metallic paint is also rough on your nice brushes. They can be, yeah. So yeah, I've got a nicer precision brush that I mostly just use for metallics because those little bits of flake tend to get down in the ferrule, and that makes your brush fuzzier or fuzzy a little faster. All right. So we're going to take our Dragon Gold, and it helps if I have a palette. There we go. I'm not going to, well, the problem is if I have it on camera, I'm going to blow out the balance. Well, let's see. Let me just see how this. Okay, well, you can see the paint. The palette looks awful, but we're not looking at the palette. We're looking at the miniature. So I can adjust the white or the brightness if need be. If anyone needs to see the palette. So we're going to get just a little bit on just the tip of our brush. Don't need very much because we're going to rub most of it off. We're going to take our paper towel. I'm going to scrub most of that off until you can only see a little bit of color coming off. Then we're going to take that and which leg are we putting this on? Doesn't matter. So let's say his right leg. We're going to take that gold and dry brush it onto his right leg. Oh, it helps if I'm painting on camera. There we go. So since I rubbed a little bit too much of my paint out, you can't really see, there's not a lot of gold on there. So that's okay. Just go get a little bit more paint, rub it off a little bit, and then keep going. Now, I strongly recommend if you're going to be dry brushing with metallics, do that first because it has a tendency to put glitter all over everything. Like, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but there's glitter on his cloak now. You can see some sparkles there. Yeah, I learned this the hard way because I went and I did some touch-ups on chainmail on a miniature I nearly finished painting, and I had to go back and paint over a lot of things that were then covered in glitter. So, okay, so let's see. Oh, yes. So when dry brushing, you might think that, okay, so that means that I don't need to rinse my brush out. Well, that's not really the case because if you leave the dry pigments in there too long, your brush will start to get really stiff and kind of crusty. So you can occasionally, rinse it out and then just make sure that you dry your brush off really well before you get your next little dab of paint. So let's say I don't rub off enough and, oh, I just like blobbed gold all in that chainmail. Oh no, that's okay. Guess what? It's just paint. You can paint back over it. It's pretty awesome. So I'm going to take my brown liner and just going to go back over that section really quick. And then while it dries, I will work on the other leg. So there we go. And then we're going to put dry brush copper onto his left leg. And then we throw our paint cap on the floor and it's all the way over there. It'll be fine. It's not going anywhere. Oh, a question that's come up in previous classes is, do you typically use a wet palette for metallics? And my answer is yes and no. I tend to use wet palettes more for if I'm working with some of my older metallics that are a little bit thick already. Reaper's metallics are really nice, especially the bones ones and the newer ones. They're fairly thinned already. And I like to have a little more control over how thin my metallics are. I tend to use a just these are just cheap weld palettes, especially if I'm doing dry brushing or I'm going to be mixing my metallics, which I do all the time because it's lots of fun. It's like I'm a mad scientist. Okay. I'm talking too much and not painting enough. Got a lot of fun stuff to go over. All right, there we go. So there's his leg that's copper and his other leg is gold. And let's go back over that area that I blobbed gold onto. There we go.
Can you go in camera a little bit?
Sorry, what was that, John?
Can you go in camera a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry. I've even got a little mark here showing me where to paint. There we go. Okay, so we got one leg gold and one leg copper and water all over my finger. Okay, let's see if there's any questions in chat. Oh, stippling and stencil brushes. Yeah, I've had several students that mentioned that they use that. I guess I just haven't gotten a good stippling brush because the one that I got was extremely stiff and just tended to want to take the paint off. So I think that I just got the wrong kind of stippling brush. Would I avoid using a wet palette with metallic paint? I mean, it depends on what you're more comfortable with. If you live in a drier climate, then it's probably fine. If you live in a fairly humid environment, then you're probably, I mean, if you're only going to be using it for an hour or so, that's probably fine. But again, it's more of I like to have a little bit more control about how thin my paints become. And so I don't use wet palettes quite as often as some other painters. So um, sorry, that's not a really great answer, but in general, I don't. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best way, but I don't generally use a wet palette when I'm working with metallics. Okay, so that is dry brushing. We did that. Oh, yes. So I keep looking for the cap and I forgot it rolled all the way across the room. Okay, so we are going to go back to our dragon gold. And so I mentioned that you can dry brush. I didn't mention, I'm mentioning now, you can dry brush multiple metallics on top of each other. So we're going to take our dragon gold. We're going to do a quick dry brush highlight on the copper leg. Copper actually, or gold actually highlights copper quite nicely because they're both warm metallics. So you can see there's just a little bit of a highlight there. Now there we go. And we'll come back to the gold leg in a little bit. Actually, no, we're going to come back to it right now. So you can also mix metallic paints. So we're going to, if you have a metal medium, I use mostly Vallejos. I've also got Pro Acryl. I'm not sure where it is. Oh, actually, there it is right there. I've been looking for this all day and it was sitting right next to my desk. So there's these. If you do not have a metallic medium, then Reaper's Filigree Silver it'll be a decent substitute. It's got a little bit of gray, but it will do if you don't have an acrylic or a metal medium. Or if you have any white metallic, that could work as well. Reaper's Pearl White isn't quite a white metallic. It's more of a pearlescent, but if you don't have anything else, you can kind of make it work. So, okay. Going to take our metal medium. And metal mediums I found tend to be fairly thick because this is just a clear acrylic base and reflective flake. It's just packed in there. So you'll see well, you might see, yeah, you'll see when I squirt it on my palette that it's pretty gooey. So if I'm using this for highlighting, I tend to have to thin it quite a lot. Oh, let's see. Would I dry brush smaller surface area metallics like jewelry? I would not personally recommend it just because dry brushing is a more of a larger area technique. And I mean, you can dry brush with just the tip of your brush, but in general, I wouldn't recommend it because something you have to remember that most miniatures are going to be seen from about this far, unless it's a competition piece, in which case I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for competition just because it's not quite as tidy, I guess. So I would recommend more picking out the jewelry just with your precision brush. Let's see. If the glitter gets in your sponge, you stuck with it. Yeah, glitter is like that. It gets everywhere. Liquefied also says a metal medium if you work with metallics a bunch like me. Ooh. Oh, Liquitex. I will have to look into that. I'm always on the hunt for other metal mediums because they all do something different. For example, Pro Acryls is extremely white. It's I have to be careful when I'm mixing it because it really likes to brighten everything up. Okay, so I've got our metal medium and we're going to mix our dragon gold with it to make sort of a bright silvery gold. And we're going to use that to highlight the golden leg. So mixing, there we go. And again, because I'm going to be dry brushing, I've not thinned this, but you can see it's a very thick mixture. So Yeah, when you're working with metal mediums, definitely thin them if you're going to be just regularly painting with them. Okay. I'm going to take this mixture, just do a quick highlight on the gold leg. Show me in camera. There we go. Oh, that's a lot more silver than I wanted. So normally before I apply a mixture to a miniature, unless it's a mixture I've worked with before, I will do a test like on my thumbnail or on my palette, on my paper towel, because that's the nature of mixing and experimenting, is you don't always know what you're going to get. So that was more silver than I wanted, so I'm going to add a little bit more gold. I'll see if I can make that highlight a little bit less silver. Okay. Nope, that just made it more silver. Well, if I had more time, I would just base coat that again and start over. Oops, I'm sorry. I keep wandering off camera. So guess what? Everybody makes mistakes. So, all right, we will set that aside for now. Did that. Talked about, yeah, I talked about thinning metallic paints. Oh, so when I'm thinning my metallics, I usually go with 2 drops of paint to 1 drop of the medium. However, that is a quite variable formula because, for example, different paint lines will be thicker than others. For example, scale 75 is a very thick metallic line, whereas Reaper's metallics are fairly thin already. However, if it's an older bottle, then they thicken over time, and so I may need to thin that a little bit more. Okay, so all right, now we are going to set the elf aside, and we're going to pull this guy out. While you're doing that, I will tell you about the 3 degrees of shiny. So this is something that I came up with a bit recently, just to sort of, I guess, encapsulate what I figured out about making metallics a little bit more interesting. So let me flip to that part of my notes. There we go. So when you're working with metallics, it's important to ask yourself, what is the history of this character or this item? Was this shield, in multiple battles? Was this sword dragged through the mud? It has this breastplate just came fresh from the blacksmith, so it's all shiny and new. So as you think about that, whether it's for gaming or for competition or just for fun, that'll help you add more interest and realism to your figure because, it'll help you kind of figure out the story that you want to tell. All right. Or if like, bright, shiny new coins versus old tarnished coins. So then the next step is to determine what level of shiny to use to get that effect. So the 3 degrees, I guess, of shiny is. Oh, hold on one moment. I just noticed I've got 2 questions in Q&A. How would I use Sophie Silver? Oh, that is an excellent question. So Sophie Silver, actually, I have found is, out of all of Reaper's paints, the very closest to Vallejo's metal medium. I wasn't going to mention it because it is a limited edition paint, but it is very comparable to Vallejo metal medium and how it behaves with mixing. Let's see. When I move, am I moving it back a bit closer to the camera on the night? Oh, is that older question? Yeah, let's see, where did he go? So that's actually a good question, is where to put the highlights on chainmail. So let me get that out of my face. So So I look at, actually, I was going to cover this a little bit later, but we can talk about it now. So something that I found that helps me figure out where the highlights will be on a figure is a flashlight. Now this one's going to be kind of bright. I don't know where my little one I got from last year's ReaperCon went, but it helps me to kind of. Oh no, that's not going to work at all. But if you've got a phone flashlight, that'll work too. But it helps me to think of, okay, if light were hitting this surface, what is the highest point of that surface? So in the case of his leg, his base kind of gets in the way. There we go. You can see that kind of the front, right along the top of his thigh, is what sticks out the most. You know, if the sun was coming down from the top, then that you can see the front of his thigh right there. So that is where I would put the highlight. And that's something that I've found helps is looking at the miniature from the direction of where I would want the light to come from. So let's say the light was coming from the side. Well, I can see this part of his leg much more than the far side, so I would highlight this area more. Most of the time, people will put the light source above the miniature because the biggest, most common light source we have is the sun. Well, and also ceiling lights. And those are all above us. So most of the time, pretending like the light is coming from the top of the miniature will help guide your highlights. Let's see. Okay. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. Okay. All right. So we're back to the 3 degrees of shiny. So the one that, well, I'll just name them and I'll talk about them. So there's balanced shiny, there is super shiny, and then there is grungy shiny. So this is a simplification, but it's more to help you kind of start thinking about different ways to approach metallic paints. So balanced shiny is just an average level of shine. There's no extreme highlights or shading. It's kind of a good balance between the two. And it's good for if you need something that's painted fairly quickly or you don't need to spend a lot of time on it. And most paint jobs that are intended for gaming use will use this just because it reads fairly well from, from an arm's length. Then there is super shiny, which has very high highlights, lots of bright metallics, very strong contrast between the light areas and the dark areas. And it usually takes a little bit more time than the balanced level of shiny. And then there is grungy shiny, which is all kinds of fun and gets more into weathering, which I don't have time to really talk about in this class, but I will show you a couple things you can do to make it look grungy. So this is old, weathered, dirty metallic surfaces. So you'll use usually darker metallics or ones that you've put like a darker wash on top of, or that you've mixed with darker colors. It can help with telling a story about where this character has been. Have they been through the mud? Have they, are they in a darker environment? Is it more of a darker tone? Or, it's oftentimes used more for like monsters and monstrous humanoids because, the I will say stereotypical monstrous humanoids don't generally have bright, shiny new equipment. They may have scavenged it from, you know, a hero that they defeated, or they found it, or they just don't take very good of their equipment in general. Oh, I forgot to mention super shiny is usually more what's used for like heroic characters because it's big and it's bold and it's very shiny. It's very noticeable. So we are going to, here we go. Not step on our headphone cord is what we're going to do. Okay, so we're going to grab our golem here. Let me get, oh, I can use in this palette. One second, let me get a drink real quick. Okay, let me check for questions. No, we're good. Okay. So I talked about that. Here we go. This is the first year I'm doing this particular demonstration, so I'm going to need to refer to my notes a little bit more. Okay, so we're going to grab our blade steel. Where did it wander off to? Did I put it away? I put it away. That would be why I couldn't find it. Okay, and I'm gonna do my 2 drops of blade steel. That's another problem with metallic paints is they have a tendency to clog more frequently, which makes sense. There's more stuff in the bottle to clog it with. Just means you have to keep them clear a little bit more often. There we go. And where did my wash medium go? There we go. Yes, hydration is very important. Everybody take a drink of water. Even though you're not an in-person convention, it's still important. There we go. And oh, I haven't said what we're doing with this yet. We are going to be painting the left side of his torso, but not all of it. So again, before we get started, we're going to take a look at this miniature and think about the light direction. So I think I'll stick with the top down look. So, oh, that's kind of, yeah, without adjusting the white balance really strongly. Yeah, don't drink from your paint cup. That's the wrong water to be drinking. So, okay, well, you can look on your own miniature that if you look down from the top, you can see where actually, if I start painting, you'll be able to see it. He's got these really big armor plates on his chest with some very deep recesses underneath. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the blade steel on top of those plates and leave the area just underneath the plate dark. That will help get us, make sure I'm on camera, get us that contrast that will help the surface to read as metallic. There we go. I need to stop moving across myself. There we go. That's better. And if you look, the area of this top, this pectoral plate that's closer to the middle of his chest is much shallower than towards the edge here where it sticks out further. So I'm going to try and mirror that as I'm putting the blade steel on this lower plate. Ah, there we go. I was worried the camera wouldn't be able to pick it up. And this right there. And oh, we'll do a couple on his belly here. There's a little one hiding right there. So we'll just give it just a little bit of the silver, the blade steel. Okay. So it's pretty quick and rough. And you can see that it's going to need another couple of coats to really get a nice solid coating. But actually, feels like I'm cheating. I live in Eastern Washington, so it's basically kind of desert-ish. Not super desert, but it's fairly dry here. So paint dries pretty quickly here. It was a quite an eye-opening experience with the first time that I tried to teach at ReaperCon because I was like, oh my gosh, paint just does not dry here. And so all of my examples and my in-person stuff took way longer than I thought because I'm like, oh, we're just sitting here watching paint dry. So I made sure to adjust the next year and allow for drying time. So you may not, so depending on where you're at, you may not be able to put that second coat on quite yet, but that is okay. I'm just throwing it on there so you can see what I'm doing a little more easily. Okay, so, oh, good question. We are not dry brushing. I apologize. So we're done with dry brushing for now, and we're switching to just a regular brush. Thank you for asking. Okay. So while everybody's working on that, see if there are any other questions that I missed. Oh yeah, a lot of reminders to painting on camera. I apologize about that. Okay. So got that. And you know, yeah, that's actually I'm rethinking the order that I'm going to do things in. Since a lot of you are probably still waiting for your first coat to dry, let's let that sit and dry for a minute, and we're going to paint his right arm with the blade steel as well. Again, remember to leave the areas right next to, sorry, the areas in between plates dark. And if you go, or if you accidentally get some metallic in here, that's fine. We're actually going to go through and tidy up those shaded areas a little bit later. So again, that's the nice thing about paint is it's just paint. You can paint it back over it if you make mistakes because we all make mistakes. Happy little mistakes. And when you get to these rivets on his arm, don't worry if you don't leave a dark area around them. We're going to go back and touch those up a little bit later. And we'll just focus on those areas there. So kind of this big area on his forearm, these three little sections on his right where his elbow is, and then this chunky sort of riveted section on his bicep. And if I am going too fast, please let me know because I can't see you all painting and I can't see if somebody's lost or is having trouble. So let me know. And I can sit and talk about more things. I have no problem with that. I'm actually just a touch ahead on time. So let's see. While I'm waiting, I'll do a second coat. Okay, you do not have to do a second coat. I'm just doing it because I've got the time. Under normal circumstances, I would definitely recommend doing at least 2 coats. For anyone who's familiar with fingernail polish, especially shiny fingernail polish, you know that generally you need at least 2 coats for it to look good. Similar kind of principle here is you want to get a nice even coating of those shiny bits to make it look nice and smooth. Okay, so I'm going to grab my steel wash. And again, let me know if I'm moving too fast. But if you're ready to move on, go ahead and grab the steel wash. And actually, I'll talk about washes for a little bit. So you can buy pre-bottled washes, which is really nice because they come in all different colors and you don't have to mix your own. And uh, it can really save time. You can also make your own wash with water and paint, or with metallic or metallic medium. That'll make an interesting wash, but not what we're after here. Flow improver, or where did my wash medium go? There we go. Wash medium, appropriately named. I when I'm making my own washes, I tend to use the Reaper clears just because there's not a lot of additional pigments in them. For example, titanium white is in a lot of paints, and it is a fairly large pigment as far as pigments go, and so it tends to it's the reason why when you thin flesh tones, they tend to get really chalky, is because they've got a lot of that white in them. So I tend to not use regular paints for my washes. But we've got our bottle of pre-mixed wash here, so we'll go ahead and use it. Oh, we will clean it off first because my bottles that see a lot of use tend to get junky in the caps. There we go. So you don't need to worry about thinning it usually. My bottle of steel wash is a little bit old though, so I might need to thin it just a little bit with some water. And water or wash medium will work fine. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's a bit thick. I'm just gonna throw a couple drops of water in there. Don't want it too thin because otherwise it'll kind of run all over the place. Okay, so when it comes to applying washes, I think it's a rather unfortunately named technique. Well, not technique, it's just it's not really, it doesn't really, let me let me start over. So when you're using a wash, you don't want to literally wash the miniature in it. I did not understand that when I first started painting, and it it was a learning experience. So you're not going to bathe your miniature in it. It's more of a uh, how thinned is this paint? So if you thin it some, it becomes a wash. If you thin it a lot, it becomes a glaze where you can just barely see a little bit of color. I've heard glazes referred to as basically paint water, which is pretty close. So a wash is less than that. Don't thin it quite so much. And we won't have time to get into glazing in this class. So I'm going to take our steel wash. We will dab it off just a little bit on our paper towel because we don't want it to flood everywhere. So we're going to, well, in this particular instance, we will be covering back over all the blade steel that we painted on his chest. But like if I were to get some wash and I did not dab it off, it's just, it's blobby, and there's not a whole lot of control to it. So we're going to go over all of these plates here. So I guess I should explain. So this area is going to be our balanced shiny. His arm is going to be our super shiny, and then we're going to do grungy shiny on his leg and paint it with water, apparently. So while you're working on putting your wash on his chest, I'll just show you my quick example I put together earlier. So you can see that there's a decent level of shine. There's a little bit of contrast, but it's nothing really like, super shiny or super dirty. It's kind of in between. And then his arm, let me move my palette so it's not, so you can kind of see that his arm, it doesn't pick up super well. There we go. So you can see his arm is much shinier, much brighter. There's a lot more contrast, especially around the rivets here. So that makes it read as much brighter, much shinier. You can see it. There's also a little bit of brightness down there. And then his leg, you can't tell very well, but that's okay because that's the point. It's not very shiny. It's kind of dull and dingy. It's it's armor that's been used a lot. It's worn. So this is what we're going to be doing on our miniature. Let me set him off to the side here as a reference. Okay. And where did I put him? Oh, right here. Okay. So while the wash is drying, we're going to go back to his arm. Oh, let me pause and take questions. Do I find thicker metallic paints like Army Painter or Folklore harder to work with? Yes, actually, I generally do because I've used like folk art and more the craft paints, and while you can use them, uh, the problem is that those craft paints are more they're not really engineered for this scale, and so the pigments are not ground quite as fine, and the flake is a little bit bigger. So you can use it, but it's not. It's going to fight you quite a bit. So if you've got nothing else, if you're like, I've only got $1, so I will buy a bottle of craft store paint. That's just fine. It's just it will not thin quite as easily. It will be it won't take thinning quite as well. So you'll start to thin it, and then it'll start to sort of separate a little bit. So um, it's not too bad for dry brushing, I've found. Um, it's not it's not ideal, but it's not terrible either. Let's see. Oh, okay. Then as far as thicker metallic paints that are made more for hobby use, like scale 75. So let me grab one as an example. Oh, here we go. I'll grab my purple here. These require a lot of shaking. All I have time to do is just a quick shake. So, oh no, it's blurping everywhere. Purple all over. Okay, so let me make sure I'm on camera. You can see that the scale 75 is definitely thicker than the Reaper metallics. So it just means that I'm going to need to thin it more. You can see how thick that is. It's not really wanting to run. So it just means that I'll thin it a little bit more aggressively. And I always start with less than I think I'll need, and then I test the consistency, and then if I need more, I can always add more. And you can always go back and add more paint, but if you do that too often, you end up with a huge puddle, which happens from time to time, but it's like I don't need to paint 50 things. So, okay. So I think things should be dry now. So brown liner. So let me get a fresh palette here. I always have a stack of them. Okay. We're going to grab our brown liner, and we are going to go back in with our, if you've got a nicer brush with a nice point to it, go ahead and grab that. We're going to go back and add contrast to his arm. And let me show you kind of what we're looking for. Oh, that's my example. I was like, wait, it's already done. There we go. So we're going to want to make sure that, there we go. Now, right between these two is nice and dark. Now remember that our light is coming from above. So, if you're struggling to see where to put where to leave the blade steel and where to put the brown liner, that can help. So, right between these two plates, right in here. And we're going to leave the area down here fairly dark. So Actually, I'll show you a trick to darken that up while still making it look metallic in just a little bit. I'm going to take our liner. I keep putting it on the left. There we go. And right in here. And then let me show you a little trick with these little rivets. So again, our light's coming from the top. So that means each of these little rivets will have a little shadow right underneath it. Well, that one will. And then this one will pretty much be in the shade, this one underneath. And this one that's straight up, even though it's directly up, we still want to put just a little bit of a shadow next to it because I've learned that what makes metallics look metallic is contrast. And I forgot to bring in, I've got a big dragon miniature that I painted all in metallics. It's Maldekar actually. And so I didn't really understand contrast at the time. So I painted him in all metallics. It's shiny everywhere, all the shiny. And you know, when I was done, he's very pretty, he's very shiny, but I just wasn't quite satisfied with it. And it wasn't until a judge at ReaperCon explained to me that well, it was that, and then also Aaron Lovejoy in a class that I took reiterated that if everything is shiny, nothing looks shiny because you don't have that contrast. So when everything is bright, you don't have anything to compare it to. So it will read as a lot more flat. So let's see. Oh, like here we go. So here's something I was messing with earlier. Don't do this. This is just an example. So you can see how I kind of blobbed blade steel all over everything, and there really isn't a lot of definition between these different plates. Whereas on the front of his arm, you can see that I've defined those areas. So this looks a lot more just not quite as shiny because everything is the same. Whereas having that contrast makes it look shiny. Okay, how are we doing on time? We are doing great on time. Okay, so oh, I forgot. I forgot to mention this earlier. So let's say that this is actually a perfect time to talk about this. So let's say that you are struggling with getting that contrast, and you're like, it's just not really, I'm having a lot of trouble with it. A trick that I learned in, I think it was my first ReaperCon actually, was take a picture of your miniature and then put it into whatever, photo software that you want. You can even just put it into Microsoft Word and you can convert it to grayscale. So what that does is, especially when you're working with colors are very distracting to our eyes. And Erin Hartwell, Kaporia, teaches a wonderful class about color theory where she mentions this, that color is tricky and it will fool our eyes into thinking that they're brighter or darker than they actually are. But when you convert it to grayscale, it gets rid of that distraction. So in the handout that I have for this class, one of my picture examples is this miniature actually that I painted, and I made his sword hilt gold. And I thought, oh, okay, that looks pretty nice. And then after I took that class, I took a picture and I converted it to grayscale, and the hilt looked exactly like this, like the blade. It looked exactly the same, tone because there wasn't sufficient contrast between the two. So I was like, oh, even though it was gold and it looked different, there wasn't sufficient contrast. So I needed to have either, made the gold darker or added more definition around it or something to make it stand out. So there's a little general tip that I've picked up. So I'll pass it on to you. Okay, so we did that. Okay, I think everything should be sufficiently dry by now. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about mixing colors. You can also mix metallics with regular paints in order to darken them. So we are going to take our blade steel and our brown liner. And let's see, what did I do? 1 to 2. Okay. We're going to take 2 drops of blade steel and combine it with 1 drop of brown liner. Oh, yes, dragon. Oh, let me check if there's any questions. Problem is that if I don't hover my mouse over the little question panel, it disappears, so then I can't see it. Where did my brush go? Oh, there it is. So this is going to give us a really dark metallic. See, I don't know if the camera's picking it up. You can see it is still a little bit shiny. You can still see the metallic in there. And I found that the liners work quite nicely for mixing with metallics as well, because they act a lot like the clears in that there's not a lot of other pigments in them. Oh, yes, thank you, John. John's got my back. I never want to miss anybody's question because I'm here and I'm focused. And it's not like you can be like, I'm lost. I have a question. So, okay, so we're going to take our mixture and we are going to, again, remembering which direction our light source is coming from, we want to use this in the more shaded areas and use just little strokes. Make sure I'm in camera so that there's not just a stark line. And there, we're going to mostly be using it on the underside of his arm. And if I'm not sure if I'm putting the shade up high enough, again, I can look from the top and it looks like I need a little bit more. There we go. There's not a the tricky part about shading and metallics or shading metallics with metallics is that there's not going to necessarily be a lot of contrast. Especially if you've got all of your lights pointed at your figure, which is what I've got right now. I mean, it just kind of mostly looks the same on the camera. So yeah, I might shade it with my hand a little bit just to see. Yeah, that's about where I want it. And once you're done doing that with the arm, we're going to use that same mixture on his thigh. Well, again, we're going to want to leave, even though we're using a dark metallic, we're still going to want to leave that little bit of a dark area between the plates because that area is not metallic at all. And so it helps give us that contrast because the contrast can be, I mentioned this more in my handout, but contrast can be a lot of different things. It can be contrasting colors. You can contrast, light and dark. You can contrast shiny and not shiny. And, the more that you have that contrast, the more interesting it will be. So I see a couple questions. Let me get this mixture on his leg real quick and I will answer those. I see your hands raised. Okay. And again, don't worry about going over the little rivets on his leg because we'll go back and define those later. Make sure that you can see. Oh, let me move that out. That will help. Oh yeah, that's better. Oh, and I just realized I forgot to thin this. Yeah, the nice thing about the Reaper Metallics is they are fairly thin already. So you can sometimes get away with not thinning them, but they'll flow a lot better and they'll settle on the miniature a lot more evenly if you do remember to thin. Okay, so let's see what questions we've got here. What color is that for shading? Oh, so this was a combination of 2 drops blade steel and 1 drop of brown liner. You can use any dark brown or black to do this with. I like to use brown liner for shading just because it's a softer dark color. And, again, it mixes very nicely with the metallics. Let's see. Okay, so the black is to provide the initial contrast. Yes. The nice thing about doing a dark coat to begin with is it saves you time later. I mean, you can prime white and then just go back in and add those areas in between. I'm lazy and I like to make things as easy for me as possible. So that's why I like to start with that dark base coat. See, what do you use if you're working with a darker metallic like bronze? That is an excellent question. So I've got time. So let's go ahead and grab bronze. You don't need to follow along. I'm just going to do a quick demo here. Where's my bronze? Do Here we go. Dragon bronze needs to be shaken up because I haven't used it in a while. Thoughts on the new metallics that Sophie is creating? Oh, Sadie. Oh, they're so pretty. Yeah, I only just got my Reaper swag late on Wednesday, so I've not had a chance to play with them. I did pull out the Aoki steel because I was hoping that it would be light enough that it would be a substitute for metal medium. It's a little bit bluish, so it doesn't quite work for what I wanted it, but oh, it's so pretty. If any of you got there's a limited edition Sky Steel. It reminds me a lot of that, where it's a sort of a medium silver with a little bit of blue in it. I love it. So it adds a lot more interest if it's, a slightly tinted silver. So yeah, I haven't had a chance to play with all the different colored metallics, but oh, they're so fun. If you like colored metallics, come to my class on Sunday and we'll just talk about nothing but that. Okay, so again, you don't have to follow along with this. So for the warmer metallics, I tend to go with a oh gosh, that's so thick. Yeah, these things clog like crazy. For bronze, I haven't worked with bronze for a while. I will do kind of like a real dark orangey color just to kind of keep that warmth underneath. Well, I guess okay, dragon bronze is a terrible example because it's already kind of goldish, but I'll undercoat with like a dark red for gold, or like a nice warm brown will work nicely. Like here's my oh gosh, I haven't used this in a while. And this is getting into more into what I do in my other class, but undercoating metallics with other colors can have some really interesting effects. I'll let that dry. So, okay, that was a little bit brighter red than I wanted. So I'm going to mix that with a little bit of my brown liner, just to darken it up a touch. Yeah, that's more what I'm after. Let's see. Oh, mermaid scale. Oh, I love that metallic. That one's so fun. because the cool thing about that is that it's actually, I don't know if you can see this. So my my paints have sat for a while because I've been in the process of moving for the last month and a half. But let's see if the camera will pick it up. You can see how the different colors have separated out. So you can see that there's blue and there's a teal. You can see that the flake on the bottom is a teal flake. So yeah, mermaid scale is a particularly uh, fun metallic because most of the metallics I've noticed use just a silver flake, and there's nothing wrong with that. But um, I can tell that's why I'm excited about what Sadie is doing with the metallics because she's just trying all kinds of crazy new things, and I'm not in frame. Oh, um, I don't know if it'll show on this camera. Well, it kind of muddied it. So I don't know if you can see the different layers. You can see that there's like the teal and the blue. That's like the colored base I was talking about. And you can see the teal flake at the bottom. So yeah, I wasn't sure if I tipped it up to show it on my document camera, it would show. Okay, sorry, getting all kinds of sidetracked. But I'll put the bronze over it. So you can see, make some nice warm bronze. Okay, so back to our actual example. So we've done the dark on the leg and there. Now we are going to grab our filigree silver. We're going to do some highlighting on his arm. Grief, my desk is starting to look like a tornado hit it. There's stuff everywhere. I just got one of the things that came in my order on Wednesday is a brand new bottle of filigree silver because the bottle that I did have was getting almost it was so thick that trying to work with it was just frustrating. So brand new bottle. Okay, so we've got our filigree silver and we're going to you know, focus on the areas where the light hits the strongest. So in this case, it's going to be top. Oop, you can see that the paint is kind of puddling. That means that I've got too much on my brush. So I'm going to dab it off a little bit and just kind of smudge that in. And we're going to focus on more the edges of these areas down here that are more shaded. Just the edge of there. And the tops of this rivet here. And top of that one. And even though this one down here is in the shade, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a pop because even though the light isn't on it directly, metallic surfaces pick up reflections from all over the place, from light bouncing off of clothing and off of the ground. And so, I'm just going to put just a little pop there. And if you're noticing that the line between your two colors is too stark, then just uh, take your brush and kind of just make that edge a little fuzzy. Get a little bit more your highlight color or your blade steel, which is our mid-tone, and just kind of make that line fuzzy so it's not quite so stark. All right, let's see if there's, okay, we're good on questions. And let me see if there's, that okay. And then since we're running no, we're fine on time. So while that is drying, I'm going to go back to his leg down here. And because I don't want to make it real shiny because, because that would, or I don't want to highlight it a lot because that would be it would defeat the purpose of having that nice dark metallic. So I'm just going to go with a slightly lighter, in this case, I'm going to go back to our blade steel because it's what I used to mix this. But you can use just a slightly lighter metallic to do the highlighting on your dark metallic colors. Blade steel and my wash medium. Oops, that was too much. That's okay, I'll just add a little bit more paint. Any questions? Okay. Oh, that's my demo guy. Okay, so for doing highlighting on his leg, we're going to keep the highlighted areas fairly small. Get that out of frame. So we're going to catch the tops of these rivets here, which I can't remember if we went back in and defined those with brown liner or not, but I think I might have just talked about it. So if we didn't do that already, then you can go ahead and do that real quick. I apologize that I wasn't keeping track of this leg down here. So that's a fairly deep shadow there. It's a shadow under there. Okay. So back to my blade steel. Gosh, it's such a big puddle. Okay, so again, since the light is coming from above, you don't want to do the whole area right here shiny. Just focus on just the edge right here and the top edge of this plate here. So there we go. And then if you can see, this leg plate curves out just a little bit right where his knee is. So we're going to do the edge of the plate down here on top of his knee. Then do just a touch on the little rivets here. So that helps to reclaim some of that shine without making it really super shiny. Okay, so the arm should be dry now. And for those of you who were able to get a metallic medium, or if you have Reaper's Pearl White or a white metallic, you can follow along for this part. If not, then I will just show it. Okay, so got a little bit of my metal medium. Why did I put it there? I need to thin it. And move that out of the way. Yeah, I can see that even with 2 drops of the wash medium, that's still thicker than I want. Because I found with highlights, if your mixture is too thick, it's just gonna it's going to create a blob rather than, a nice even line or dot. There, that's better. Yeah, that's closer. Okay, so what we're going to do with this very white metallic, I guess it's still a little thick, but I'll just make it work, is we're going to just use this for very sharp, very bright highlight on the rivets. You want to put this on the opposite side of where you put the shadow with the brown liner. Just right on the top there. Oh, cool, the camera is picking it up. And then I'm going to catch just the very tip of this one down here. And then for on top of the arm, actually, I'm going to thin this a little bit more because otherwise it'll just give me a big old blobby streak. There we go. I'm just going to do just a very, very thin fuzzy line right at the top here. And just a touch on the edge of that one there. So you can see that there's a much starker contrast on his arm than on his chest. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, but if you're looking for something to look really shiny, then adding that contrast is the way to do it. So okay, so once you're done with that, we're going to be done with Mr. Gollum here. We've got about 5 minutes left. So what we'll do is we will actually go back to our elf dude here and grab one of your favorite colors. Doesn't matter what color it is. I'm going to grab, where's my purples? Here we go. Grab my, grab Desna Blue here. And we are going to do just a quick base coat of the back of our elf miniature. And then while that is drying, I will take questions. You can do red or black or gray, whatever sounds good to you. I'm actually going to grab one of my base coating brushes so I can put this on real quick. I'm going to get this base coat down real quick and then I know I saw a question pop up. And again, I would need a few more coats to make this look decent, but it will serve for demonstration purposes. Okay. Let's see. What did I mix with the metal medium? Oh, it is just the wash medium. It was to help thin it out because the metal medium is very thick. So wash medium or flow improver would have done the same job, or airbrush medium, I've heard, is also about the same kind of thing. So actually, while that is drying, because I don't know if we'll have time to actually walk through the demonstration. So this is just to show how important it is to be mindful of what you're putting underneath your metallics, because especially the silvers are a bit translucent, which means you can do all sorts of cool stuff with them. So I went ahead and these all in frame will be difficult. There we go. Now I can actually see. And I base coated a bunch of different elves with different colors and put 3 different metallics over the top of them. You can see kind of what each one does. And we'll scooch this one in. So the advice is typically to put a dark color underneath metallics. And the reason for that is because I'm not very good at explaining this. It has to do with the way that light interacts with a surface. So it will look a lot brighter and shinier over a dark surface as opposed to a white one. Let's see, where's my black one? Here we go. So over the white, the camera is not showing it very well, but over the white, it's the silver is not quite as bright. Yeah, it just all looks shiny on the camera. But it'll be it'll be almost more of an enamel sort of look on the white. One of my favorite combinations is red underneath gold. You can see it makes a nice warm gold. You can see it made the silver fairly warm. The red under copper is red and orange under copper is fun as well because it like makes it more copper, makes it like very bright. Whereas over like the green, for example, the copper looks more aged and kind of worn. So, I apologize. We ran out of time to demonstrate on your actual miniature, but you can take the gold, silver, and copper we used in class and experiment with putting different metallics over your colored base coat and see how they react. So, is there any last minute questions before we wrap things up? I wanted to thank you all for coming, and I hope that so anytime I teach a class, I have my goal is for my students to walk away with 3 things: that you've learned something, what at least one new thing, that you had fun, and that you're willing to try new things. So we looked at a lot of different things you could do with metallics, and I hope that you're now not afraid to go and experiment on your own and try new things. Just get messy and have fun. So yes, and this is recorded, so you can go back and watch again and again and watch me stumble over my words. So oh good. I'm glad that everybody had fun and learned some things. So oh, the code. Yes, let me give you the code so you can all join my boot squad. Let's see. 1 second. Everybody needs to be on the boot squad. It is 14526. And I'll write that down for you. 14526. There you go. I think that's in frame. We'll go back. Go back. Okay. Oh, there we go. All right. So that is unfortunately the end of the time that we have together, but thank you all for coming, and